Among the shining halls of Asgard, where Odin's wisdom guides the fates of gods and men, where Thor's hammer thunders against giants, and where Freya's beauty stirs the hearts of mortals, there stands another figure, less sung in the skaldic verses, yet no less important to the balance of the 9 realms. This is Forseti, son of Baldur the Fair and Nanna, grandson of Odin, the god who presides over justice, reconciliation, and the silent weighing of truth. Forseti's very name means, the presiding one, and in the ancient halls of Glitnir, his radiant silver and gold court, he sits upon a high seat, listening to disputes brought before him. Unlike the roaring laughter of Thor or the cunning whispers of Loki, Forseti's voice is calm, deliberate, like the steady rippling of water against stone. The myths tell that no one leaves his presence without finding peace, for his judgments are binding, his reasoning irrefutable, and his fairness unmatched. Where others bring war, Forseti brings quiet resolution, where others seek vengeance, he seeks balance. Yet Forseti's role is shrouded in mystery. The old poems speak only briefly of him, as though the skalds, fascinated by tales of bloodshed and thunder, pass too lightly over the quiet judge. And yet, the silence around Forseti has given rise to a deeper fascination. What were the stories told in hushed tones around the fire, when warriors and farmers alike dreamed of a god who could end quarrels without steel? In this telling, we will walk through the myths and legends of Forseti as though they were long sagas, weaving together the fragments that survive and breathing life into the spaces left empty by time. You will hear of Glitnir, the radiant hall of judgment, of the time Forseti journeyed to settle a quarrel between gods and giants, of how his wisdom prevented war when blood was demanded, and of the fate that awaited him when Ragnarok's storm descended upon the world. Here begins the story of Forseti, the silent judge, the god who spoke less often than his kin, but whose words carried the weight of law itself. High upon the shining plains of Asgard, there stood a hall unlike any other. It was not built for feasting like Valhalla, nor for magic like Odin's golden throne room, but for law. This was Glitnir, Forseti's hall, whose walls gleamed with silver and whose roof shone with the brilliance of purest gold. From miles away travelers could see its radiance, a beacon for those who sought truth and reconciliation. Each dawn, Forseti seated himself upon his high chair at the center of Glitnir. The light of the golden roof fell upon him, casting a glow that made his face seem calm and timeless. Around him, benches of polished ash wood stretched out, where gods, elves, dwarves, and even wandering mortals came to present their quarrels. Unlike other halls of Asgard, no weapon was permitted past its threshold. Here, words were sharper than swords, and silence weighed heavier than steel. The myths tell that none who entered Glitnir ever left without resolution. If 2 men came quarreling over land, Forseti would listen, not to their shouts, but to the tremor in their voices, the hesitation in their words, the truths they tried to hide. His judgments cut through deception like a blade through cloth. And yet, unlike the thunderous decrees of Odin, Forseti's words fell like rain on dry earth, gentle, measured, yet nourishing to the soul. One tale speaks of 2 dwarves, brothers who fought over a treasure they had forged together, a necklace wrought of moonlight and gold. Their hatred had grown so fierce that they nearly destroyed each other. Forseti welcomed them into Glitnir and spoke to them not of ownership, but of legacy. "What you have made will outlast you," he told them. "Will you be remembered for the jewel, or for the hatred that consumed you?" Ashamed, the brothers agreed to place the necklace upon the altar of Freya, goddess of beauty, thus ending their quarrel. Thus, Glitnir became not only a hall of justice but a sanctuary where even the fiercest rivalries found peace. In a world where blood feuds tore clans apart, where gods and giants sharpened weapons in endless strife, Forseti offered a different path. His hall stood as a shining reminder that true strength is not always found in the clash of steel, but in the quiet triumph of fairness and reason. So it was said, Glitnir would never fall so long as words were honored and justice sought, for its foundation was not stone, but truth itself. In the days before Ragnarok's shadow stretched across the worlds, there was a quarrel so great that even Odin's wisdom and Thor's strength could not bring resolution. It began with the Jotnar, the giants of Jotunheim, who accused the Aesir of breaking an ancient pact over the sharing of rivers that crossed their borders. The giants claimed that the gods had dammed the waters to favor Midgard's fields, leaving Jotunheim in drought and hunger. Anger boiled like molten stone in their hearts, and war seemed inevitable. The gods gathered in council. Thor struck his hammer against the table, eager to settle the matter with battle. "Let them starve," he thundered. "Better no water than to bow before their demands." Odin, though wiser, could not deny that the giants had been wronged, for he knew the runes of fate would favor truth. Freyr and Njord pleaded for peace, for they too understood the power of rivers and seas. Yet the council teetered on the edge of violence, until Frigg, wise and watchful, spoke, "Let the matter be judged by Forseti, for none can question the fairness of his word." Thus messengers were sent, and both gods and giants marched to Glitnir, the shining hall. The golden roof gleamed so brightly that even the frost-hardened hearts of the giants wavered, for never had they seen such purity of craft. Inside, Forseti awaited them, seated upon his high chair, calm as a still lake at dawn. The giants presented their grievances, their booming voices echoing through the silver walls. The gods countered with their own claims, their words sharp with pride. For 3 days and nights they argued, until their throats grew hoarse. Forseti did not interrupt, he listened with eyes that seemed to pierce their souls. At last, when silence fell, he rose. "You speak of rivers as though they are chains to be owned," he said, his voice low but carrying to every ear. "Yet rivers are neither Aesir nor Jotun. They are the blood of Ymir, flowing since the dawn of time. None may claim mastery over what was never theirs." Then Forseti decreed that the rivers should flow freely, unblocked by dam or barrier, nourishing both Midgard and Jotunheim alike. To seal the peace, he ordered that the gods and giants meet each spring to renew their oath beside the waters, offering gifts to ensure balance was preserved. The giants, though proud, could not refute his words. The gods, though reluctant, bowed to his judgment. And so, for a time, bloodshed was averted, not by hammer or spear, but by the steady hand of justice. Thus Forseti became known even among the giants as the only god whose words could still their wrath. Though they hated the Aesir, they could not deny the power of the silent judge. There was a time in Midgard when blood feuds threatened to consume whole clans. One killing led to another, vengeance piled upon vengeance, until the ground itself seemed thirsty for more. In such times, men prayed not only to Thor for strength or Odin for wisdom, but to Forseti, that justice might soothe what steel could not. The skalds tell of a feud between two families, the Hrafnsons and the Eiriksons. It began when a drunken brawl at a feast ended in the death of Eirik, son of Rolf. The Hrafnsons swore it was an accident, a strike made in panic when words turned to blows. But the Eiriksons demanded blood for blood. Soon farms were burned, kin were slain, and both sides prepared to wage war that would drench the valley in fire. Desperate, the chieftains called upon Forseti. Messengers carried offerings to Asgard, and in time the god himself descended, cloaked not in armor but in a robe of white, his staff gleaming like polished ash. The clans gathered at a sacred grove, their warriors restless, hands upon the hilts of swords. Forseti raised his hand, and silence fell. He spoke not of anger or guilt, but of the weight each family carried. To the Eiriksons he said, "Your grief is a wound, but vengeance cannot mend it. Will more widows ease your sorrow?" To the Hrafnsons he said, "Though you claim no malice, a life was taken. Shall you walk free while another lies in the earth?" For 3 nights he listened, neither condemning nor excusing. Then he offered a path. The Hrafnsons would pay Wergild, a man price of silver, cattle, and labor, to the Eiriksons, not as purchase for the slain, but as recognition of the life lost. More than this, Forseti decreed that the eldest sons of both families would swear an oath of brotherhood before the gathered folk, binding their fates together. If either raised hand against the other again, both clans would be cursed to wander without home or kin. It was a hard judgment, but Forseti's words carried the weight of iron. The Eiriksons accepted, for their grief was tempered by the gods' fairness. The Hrafnsons submitted, for they knew their honor would be restored through recompense. The feud ended, and in time the two clans became allies, their bond stronger than their hatred had ever been. Thus Forseti taught that justice is not the endless spilling of blood, but the healing of wounds, even when the scar remains. His judgment did not erase the past, but it gave the future a chance to grow. And so men remembered, vengeance may feed the dead, but justice nourishes the living. When the doom of the gods drew near, even Glitnir, the hall of silver and gold, began to dim. The roof that once gleamed brighter than the sun seemed veiled in shadow, and the silver pillars lost their luster. For the signs of Ragnarok were upon the 9 realms, Fimbulwinter froze Midgard, wolves devoured the sun and moon, and the Gyllerhorn's echo shook the roots of Yggdrasil itself. Forseti sat in his hall, hearing fewer cases as men and gods alike turned from law to war. Where once they sought peace, now they armed themselves, for prophecy declared that the end would be written in blood. Yet still, some came, farmers disputing land even as frost killed their fields, warriors quarreling over honor even as doom loomed. To each Forseti gave judgment, though sorrow weighed in his voice, for he knew that when chaos ruled, justice could no longer hold. On the day the giants marched, led by Surtur with his flaming sword, Asgard shook. The Bifrost shattered under the weight of monsters, and the plain of Vigrid filled with the clash of gods and foes. Thor battled Jormungandr, Odin faced Fenrir, Freyr met Surtur in hopeless combat. Amid this storm, Forseti stood not with sword or spear but with his staff, seeking to mediate even at the world's end. It is said he strode into the heart of battle, raising his voice above the thunder, "Enough. This war will leave no victor. Lay down your arms, and let balance be restored." For a heartbeat, the clash stilled, as though even gods and giants felt the weight of his words. But the silence shattered beneath the roar of Fenrir and the fire of Surtur. The age of reason had ended, swept away by the tide of doom. Some skalds whisper that Forseti perished there, trampled beneath the chaos, his hall consumed in flame. Others tell a softer tale. That he withdrew, vanishing into the deep places of the world, carrying the last spark of justice into the shadows, waiting for the new dawn after the fire. And when the world is reborn, green and young again, Forseti will return, his hall shining once more, to guide the children of gods and men in a time when peace may finally take root. Thus ended, or perhaps only paused, the story of Forseti, the god who judged without anger, who sought peace when all others reached for war. His words may have been silenced by Ragnarok, yet his spirit endures wherever men seek fairness over vengeance, and reason over wrath. In the western seas, where storm and salt claimed countless lives, war boiled among the sea kings. Rolf of the Iron Isles and Jarl Einar of the Fjords both claimed dominion over a string of rocky isles rich in fish and safe harbors. Their fleets clashed again and again, painting the waters red. Neither side could win, for every victory was answered with equal loss. The sea itself groaned beneath their hatred. Rolf, weary of endless bloodshed, swore by Njord, god of the waves, that he would sail to Asgard for judgment. Einar, mistrustful yet unwilling to lose honor, followed. Thus both warlords came to Glitnir, where Forseti waited in his radiant hall. The sea kings entered armed, their cloaks stiff with salt, their beards heavy with pride. But no man bore steel into Glitnir, for Forseti's gaze disarmed them more than any warrior. They spoke their grievances, their voices booming like storm tides. Forseti listened, eyes calm as the still waters between gales. At last he spoke. "The sea is not yours to own. She is Njord's gift, wide enough for all. But your quarrel will drown more men than waves if it goes unchecked." He decreed that the islands would not belong to one king or the other, but would be held in trust by both. Each spring, the fleets of Rolf and Einar would meet, swearing oaths before Forseti's name that no man would spill blood upon those shores. The fish and harbors would be shared, the wealth divided, and any who broke the pact would be cursed to die at sea. Reluctantly, they agreed. The first oath was sworn with solemn hands upon the silver benches of Glitnir. And so the isles became known as the Oath Islands, sacred ground where men might land in peace even in times of war. Generations later, skalds sang that any captain who shed blood upon those rocks would feel Forseti's unseen hand drag his ship into the deep. Thus Forseti bound the sea kings with law stronger than chains, proving once more that justice could tame even the storm. Beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, where the caverns of Svartalfheim gleamed with forges and jewels, there rose a quarrel that threatened to spill into the light of Alfheim, home of the elves. The dwarves, master smiths of stone and fire, had long mined veins of silver that ran like rivers through the deep earth. Yet one tunnel broke through into a crystal cavern sacred to the elves, who claimed it as the dwelling of spirits. The dwarves argued that they had carved the stone with their own hands, that every hammer's strike was their rightful labor. The elves countered that no forge could claim what was older than gods, that the cavern's light belonged to them as children of radiance. Soon both races sharpened blades, and whispers reached Asgard that war would break out between forge and forest. Odin cared little for such quarrels, and Thor declared he would crush them both if their strife troubled Midgard. But Frigg counseled that only Forseti could cool their anger, for his voice alone might be heard where pride deafened all. So Forseti journeyed below the earth, bearing no sword, only his staff of ash. He descended into the cavern where dwarves and elves stood face to face, weapons gleaming in torchlight and crystal light alike. His arrival brought silence, for even the proudest bowed before the calm authority in his eyes. He listened to each side in turn. The dwarves spoke of their toil, their sweat, their hammers echoing in the dark. The elves spoke of their songs, their ancient bond with the crystal glow. Both were fierce, both unwilling to yield. Forseti closed his eyes, and the hall waited, tense as a bowstring. At last he rose and declared, "The cavern is neither wrought by hammer nor song alone. It was shaped before either dwarf or elf drew breath. You shall share it, as the veins of Ymir's bones run through both your realms. The dwarves may carve the silver, but only with elven blessing. The elves may sing their songs, but only with dwarven guardianship. Together you will keep the cavern as sacred ground, divided in labor yet united in duty." Though grumbling passed among the dwarves and whispers among the elves, none could deny the fairness of the judgment. So they laid down arms and bound themselves with oaths, knowing that to break Forseti's word was to defy law itself. Thus, for a time, forge and forest found peace beneath the earth. And it was said that when dwarves and elves quarreled again in later ages, they remembered the day Forseti's voice stilled their wrath, and they measured their grievances not by pride, but by balance.